The day I saw my own obituary, the coffee went cold in my hands. It was a Thursday in June, the kind of clear Arizona morning where the light comes in like a promise. I had opened the porch door to let in the smell of creosote and dust after a small overnight sprinkle, sat down with my mug and the local paper, and there it was halfway down the page, my name in a little black box. Eleanor Thompson, beloved mother, educator, friend. I read the lines 3 times because my brain refused to make sense of them. I touched the pulse at my neck, felt it tapping along, steady as a metronome, and laughed out loud because what else does a person do when the world declares her gone and she's sitting right there in her robe, alive and barefoot, with chipped blue nail polish? I wish I could tell you I immediately understood what was going on. But at 68, even with a career full of solving hard problems, a person wants to believe the best of her own blood. You don't leap to the darkest conclusion about your child. You don't jump from this must be some mistake to my son did this, even if your gut whispers it into the empty morning. I set the paper down, went back inside and rinsed my cup. I told myself it was a computer glitch, a typo, a clerical error at some spreadsheet in the sky. Then the phone rang. "Mrs. Thompson?" The voice was syrupy and careful. "This is Connie with Desert Sun Life. I am so very sorry for your loss. We received the paperwork yesterday and we'd like to extend our condolences to your son, Michael. We just need to confirm a few details to process the claim." I leaned against the counter. The tile felt cool under my feet. "What paperwork?" "The death certificate," she said gently. "We have you listed as passing on June 12th. "I'm speaking to you on June 13th, I said. "And unless I've become a very chatty ghost, I am not dead." There was a pause. The tone shifted. "Ma'am, are you Eleanor?" "I am, and I'm going to need you to tell me exactly who filed what." I hung up with a name, a claim number, and a strange detached calm, the kind you get when you've fallen on the ice but you haven't started to hurt yet. I pulled on jeans and a white blouse, tied my hair into a ponytail, and drove into the kind of phoenix heat that bakes through the windshield and straight into your bones. I had once thought summers like that would be the worst of my life. I was wrong. Paper cuts bleed more than one clean slice, and betrayal, real bare-faced betrayal, doesn't stab you once. It pricks at you in small, precise places you'd forgotten were even tender. On the drive, every corner of my life with Michael came back, and by the time I pulled into the Desert Sun Life parking lot, my hands were shaking in that old familiar way mothers know. The way they tremble when your boy falls off his bike and scrapes half his face, and you're gentle and firm all at once, because the only person who can fix him is you. I was 24 when I had Michael. I was a high school English teacher then, not a principal yet, still wearing thrift store blazers and correcting essays at my tiny table, while my husband, Daniel, worked nights at the steel yard to make ends meet. Michael came into the world furious and pink, and I remember thinking I had never seen anything fight so hard to live. He cried as if he had 1,000 years of stories stuck behind his little ribs. Daniel liked to hold him under the ceiling fan and chant, big man," until Michael quieted, eyes tracking the blades like a scientist. We didn't have much: a rental near South Mountain, a hand-me-down crib, a car that coughed, but we had our tiny family, and I had a plan. I would make sure my son had a life with possibilities. Daniel died when Michael was 7. A beam fell wrong. That's the short version you use when the full one makes strangers uncomfortable. At the funeral, while the desert sun burned through black fabric, Michael stood beside me like a soldier. He didn't cry then. He waited until the house was empty and he was in my lap, and then he sobbed so hard his body shook with it. I learned, in that moment, the weight of promises. I told him we'd be okay. I told him I'd keep the light on, and I did. I moved us to a smaller place on a quieter street. I took an extra job tutoring. I packed lunches and went to every parent conference and science fair. When he needed a new clarinet, I sold my wedding ring because what's a ring compared to an 8-year-old boy who wants to play music? We weren't perfect. Michael was stubborn and too smart for his own good. He had a way of smoothing truths to fit the shape he needed, even as a kid. Once he told his 5th grade teacher that I had told him it was fine not to do the math homework because we were in mourning that day. I hadn't said any such thing. When I asked him why he lied, he looked straight at me and said, "But it worked." I thought it was a childish shortcut he'd outgrow, an experiment in how rules bend. I didn't yet understand that some people build an entire map of the world around the idea that everything can be persuaded with the right kind of pressure. He loved debate team, loved the feeling of turning a room with words. He said he wanted to be a lawyer. I believed that meant justice, ethics, a life that would make his father proud. When the acceptance letter came from law school, I cried into the paper. I did the math on the tuition and realized it would chew us both alive. And still, I said yes. Of course yes. Because mothers do that, I found a way. I took out a second mortgage on a house that needed a new roof. I stopped having the air conditioning on low and learned to live with fans. I took the principal position when it came because it meant a better salary and a better chance. I told myself strain was a bridge to something brighter. Michael struggled after graduation. He wasn't a top-of-the-class hire. He took document review gigs in windowless rooms and came home cranky. He told me the system was rigged. He told me other people had connections he didn't have. I told him to keep going. That momentum is momentum, no matter how much dust it kicks up. He got an apartment near Tempe with a view of the freeway on-ramp and a roommate who left beer cans on the windowsill. He brought home a woman named Vanessa with hair like a shampoo commercial and a laugh that sounded like sugar cracking. I wanted to like her, and for a while I did. She said please and thank you and brought a store-bought pie on Thanksgiving. But there was a coldness at the center of her when she looked at me, a little blink that said she had measured me and found me small. He started asking for help, and I started giving it. And if you're listening to this with the benefit of hindsight, you're probably telling me not to. But hindsight is just a mirror held up after the fall. He wasn't asking for luxury. He was asking for rent when the roommate skipped out, for a phone bill after a car repair. He said it was temporary. He said once he got on his feet, he'd pay me back. I told him not to worry, that he was my boy. I kept track on a folded piece of paper anyway because accountability is a kind of love too. It changed slowly. That's how these things always change. You don't give away your keys in one sitting. It starts with convenience. He offered to help me simplify my bills. He said, "Mom, let me put everything on autopay. I'll set up a folder on your laptop so you can see every statement. It's safer that way. Nobody licks stamps anymore." He started collecting my mail from the box when he stopped by so I wouldn't have to walk to the curb in the heat. He told me not to worry about it, that he'd leave what mattered on the counter. When I noticed some things were missing, an explanation of benefits I was sure had arrived, a bank flyer addressed to a state of. I told myself I must be misremembering. I am not a woman who misremembers. But I had taught other people's children for 38 years. I know how to tell a lie from an honest mistake. I chose, at first, not to call it by its name. My pension from the Arizona teachers' retirement system had kept me comfortable, not rich. I could buy fresh peaches at the market when they were in season. I could give to the library's summer reading program without looking at my account twice. The monthly deposit had come like clockwork since the day I retired. The day it didn't, I thought the computer had hiccuped. I called the number on the back of the letterhead. "Mrs. Thompson, our records show you are deceased," the woman said. The way she said it, flat, apologetic, made me think of customer service scripts for cable outages. "We are sorry for the inconvenience. We understand you are not receiving your channels. We put a hold on benefits when we receive that report. If there's been a mistake, we'll fix it. We just need you to come in person with identification." It's a strange thing to stand under fluorescent lights and prove to a stranger that you are alive. I took a number and sat next to a man arguing softly with his ex-wife about who had forgotten who at the school pickup. My number popped up on the screen. I handed over my driver's license, my social security card I hadn't taken out of my wallet in years, a stack of things with my name on them, like a breadcrumb trail. The woman at the desk, whose badge said Susan, typed for a long time, frowned, then disappeared into a back room. When she came back, she had a supervisor with her. He was a large man with a generous face. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, "we're very sorry. This does happen occasionally when a funeral home files incorrectly or we get a record in error. We'll correct it. I do have to ask you, has anyone else been managing your affairs recently? Sometimes a family member tries to help and checks a box they shouldn't." "No one is supposed to be declaring me dead," I said. The supervisor glanced at Susan. They both softened a little around the edges. "We'll flag your account and require in-person verification for any changes from now on," he said. "You'll be back on the next cycle. If you'll sign here, we'll issue a temporary check today." I signed. My hand shook. I called Michael in the parking lot. "Hey, Mom," he sounded cheerful. "How's your Thursday?" "My Thursday is curious," I said. "My pension office thinks I'm dead." Silence, then a laugh. "Well, that's not possible. You're on the phone. Do you know anything about it?" "Mom, why would I know anything about that?" His voice edged just slightly. "I swear, you need to stop reading weird mail. There are so many scams. Don't call any number unless I tell you to. Did you give anyone your social?" "I gave my Social Security number to the Social Security office," I said. "I'm fine." He exhaled. "Okay, good. Look, Vanessa and I have dinner plans. We'll swing by Saturday. We'll fix your computer and set up alerts so you stop getting junk." When I hung up, I sat there in the hot car long enough for the seatbelt buckle to start burning my hip. There are moments when a person knows the shape of the truth before she says it. It arrives like a storm you smell before you see it. I didn't say anything to Michael Saturday. I let him set up alerts. I let him explain, as if to a child, how not to click on things. I smiled when Vanessa complimented the lemon bars and called me Ellie, like we were equals. I watched them walk back out to his car, watched the way their shoulders almost touched, but didn't quite, as if he was always leaving her room to pull away. On Monday, the funeral home called. "Mrs. Thompson, this is Judith from Desert Rest. We just have a few questions about the service details your son specified for—" She stopped. Oh, you are Mrs. Thompson." "I am." Another careful voice, the way people talk when they realize they are standing in a room full of gasoline and holding a lighter they didn't mean to flick. There must be a misunderstanding. We have paperwork from your son indicating—" "You have a death certificate," I said. "Whose signature is on it?" She stammered through a vague answer. I thanked her and hung up. I put my palms on the kitchen counter, my vision tunneling to the speckled laminate. There is a version of me that would tell you I collapsed in grief. That is not true. I am a woman who watches storms and starts moving the patio chairs inside. In the space of a breath and then another, I stop being the kind of mother who assumes a harmless explanation and became the kind of mother who locks the doors and opens a blank notebook. The doors and opens a blank notebook. The next morning, I made an appointment with an attorney who specializes in elder law and estate issues. Her name was Nina Patel. She had warm eyes and a wedding ring with a diamond so tastefully small you believed everything that came out of her mouth. Her office smelled like tea. She listened while I told my story from the newspaper to the phone calls, and she did something I will be forever grateful for. She believed me quickly. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, "I want you to understand that even the implication of what you've described is a crime. It's fraud and identity theft at minimum. We are going to help you, but I need to ask for your patience and for caution. Do not confront your son. Do not tell him what you've discovered. We'll need to see what's been filed and by whom. I'll ask an investigator I trust to pull records quietly. I have been a hard mother and a soft mother," I said. "Today I think I have to be a quiet one." She smiled kindly. "That's exactly right. Some days drag. That week did not. The investigator," Nina called him D'Angelo, never by a first name, "found a paper trail that made my skin go cold. Someone had prepared a notice of death, complete with a cause written in jargon, and pushed it through channels that should have required verification. Someone had used my old address on Saguaro Drive, not this house where I've lived for 12 years, to list a place of death. The document carried a physician's name that had once treated Daniel, a man who had retired 15 years ago. The signature looked like a child had practiced it in a bathroom mirror. It is funny, the details the brain chooses to fixate on when the bottom falls out. I kept thinking about my old address written there in black ink, the home with the squeaky screen door and the olive tree in the yard that dropped fruit on the driveway. The house where Michael had built blanket forts and cried into my lap and then slammed his bedroom door at 16 because I wouldn't let him leave the state with a girl who wanted to become a poet. I thought, whoever did this was not only careless, he was leaning on my history like a shortcut. "Who filed it?" I asked Nina. She met my eyes. "We can't say with absolute certainty yet, but the strongest likelihood is your son. If he didn't physically file it, he had someone do it for him." "He's an attorney," I said, "or at least he has a degree." "That does not immunize a person against stupidity," she said dryly. Over the next days, the trouble came like dominoes. My pharmacy informed me their system listed me as deceased, and could I have someone else pick up the prescription? The bank froze an account temporarily because the algorithm flagged the file. The electric company apologized for sending a bereavement notice and wanted to discuss a deposit refund. Every conversation started with the same sentence: "We are so sorry for your loss." I found myself practicing how to say, "Clearly, I am still among the living," without losing my temper. The first time I did lose it, I was alone. It was late, and I was sitting on the edge of my bed holding Daniel's old wallet like a talisman. I opened the paper where I had been keeping track of money I had lent Michael, and I copied the total into a clean line with a pen. The number was not ruinous, but it was not small. It represented new tires for his car, and the phone bill, and that time his computer died right before an interview. It represented love. And then I wrote another number. The insurance policy payouts, the pension payments stopped, the accounts that could be emptied while the world believed I wasn't here to care. That number made my hand go numb. I cried into the pillow so the neighbors wouldn't hear and become part of the story. I told Nina I wanted to take back what little control I could. She nodded. With her guidance, I changed the passwords that protected my life and installed new locks on my exterior doors with a local handyman named Ray, who whistled while he worked. I visited the Social Security office again, armed with everything short of a notarized note signed by God. They put permanent safeguards on my record and promised the flag would not reappear. I took my original birth certificate out of its envelope for the first time in decades and ran my finger over the faded ink. Through it all, I didn't tell Michael. He texted me videos of his cat, called twice to ask if he could pick up some of my mail to save me the trip, and sent me a link to a restaurant where he wanted to take me for my birthday. He said, "Don't worry about anything, Mom. I'll take care of you." I thought of the death certificate typed with an old address and a stranger's signature and wondered if "take care of" meant what he thought it meant. The investigator found it a week later, a probate petition filed in Maricopa County Superior Court, in re estate of Eleanor Thompson, deceased. Michael had signed as petitioner. He had listed himself as my son and my sole heir. A hearing was set for the following Tuesday at 10 in the morning. He had attached exhibits. He wanted letters of administration. The request was matter-of-fact and tidy, like a grocery list. People imagine that rage is loud. Mine wasn't. It was a smooth, cold thing, a pond frozen to perfect glass. I sat at my kitchen table reading the petition, and something inside me settled. I thought of my students over the years, all the young people who had stood in my office with a damp hall pass and a story that made no sense, the ones who tried to sell me a convenient lie. The way I had looked at them and said kindly, "That's not what happened, sweetheart, and you know it." This was like that, except the child was mine and the stakes were a life. Nina asked me a question no one had ever asked me. What outcome do you want? People think justice is a one-word answer. It isn't. It's a small, complicated animal that has to be fed exactly right or it bites you. I shut my eyes and made the shape of it in my mind. I wanted the court record to show indelibly that I was alive. I wanted the financial systems to correct themselves. I wanted the people who helped him, whoever they were, to answer for the harm they had done. I wanted to see Michael's face when he realized there is a line even a smooth talker cannot convince the world to erase. I want to walk into that hearing, I said, and say, I object on the grounds that I am not dead. Nina's smile arrived slow and delighted. Mrs. Thompson, she said, we can make that happen. The next days moved with a precision I found soothing. Nina filed an objection with the court, sealed in a way that would not alert Michael before the hearing. She contacted the county attorney's office and explained the situation. The investigator coordinated with them to ensure the right people would be present in the hallway without being obvious. I wrote out a list for myself on a yellow legal pad, what to bring, what to wear, what not to say if anger tugged at my sleeve. I ate oatmeal with honey in the mornings and called my friend Mavis in the evenings to tell her I was all right. Mavis offered to be in the courtroom with me. I said yes. The night before the hearing, I pulled out the navy suit I had worn to every important ceremony in my life. Teacher of the Year awards, principal installation, retirement. I polished the sensible shoes you can stand in for hours without regretting. I took my pearl earrings from the jewelry box and thought of the day Daniel saved up to buy them at the mall, the way he had handed me the tiny bag with both hands as if it weighed more than it did. I slept in the kind of careful, shallow sleep people learn in hospitals and airports. On Tuesday morning, the courthouse smelled like waxed floors and coffee. I left my purse with Mavis, took a breath, and walked through the metal detector. The bailiff had a face that said he had seen everything 1,000 times before and would believe anything twice only when it filed a motion. I sat in the back row between Mavis and a woman with a stack of folders whose sticky notes looked like a parade. Michael was already there when I walked in. He wore a gray suit that fit a little too snugly at the shoulders and a burgundy tie he'd borrowed from someone who cared about ties. Vanessa was beside him in a cream dress that told the world she had nothing to do with any of this. He didn't see me right away. He leaned toward Vanessa and smiled that half smile I remember from his 8th grade chorus concert when he forgot the lyrics and pretended he hadn't. I watched my son sit in a courtroom under fluorescent lights and thought of the boy who once lay on his stomach in the living room, building ships from Lego, tongue caught between his teeth in concentration. When the clerk called the case, Michael stood. "Good morning, Your Honor. Michael Thompson, petitioner pro se." The judge was a woman with silver hair pulled into a low bun and an expression that said she had raised teenagers. She nodded. "Is the decedent's next of kin present? Is anyone else here in the matter of Miss Thompson's estate?" I stood. The bailiff looked sharply in my direction. Mavis squeezed my hand so hard I felt bones. I walked to the front slowly because walking quickly would have made it a performance, and I am done with performance. "Your Honor," I said, "my name is Eleanor Thompson. I object on the grounds that I am not dead." There is a silence. Courts know that churches don't. It's the silence of gears stopping mid-turn. The judge blinked once, twice. She leaned forward. "Ma'am, please state your name again for the record." "Eleanor May Thompson. Date of birth, April 9th, 1957. I can recite the Pledge of Allegiance and the phone number of the principal's office at Madison High School if that helps." The bailiff's hand moved toward his radio. The clerk's eyebrows migrated north. Michael turned fully then. For a split second, his face did not move. It was not shock. It was the absence of any expression at all, like a cable had been cut to every muscle. Then his mouth opened. "Mom, what are you doing?" There were 3 people in the second row who stood up at once, as if someone had pulled strings attached to their shoulders. Nina was one of them. She had on a black dress and a small, satisfied smile. Next to her were 2 men in suits I did not recognize who carried themselves with the particular stillness of people who carry badges for a living. The judge took a breath. "Mr. Thompson," she said, voice level, "do you wish to amend your petition?" Michael's eyes skittered from my face to the judge and back. "Your Honor, this is there's been a misunderstanding." "By whom?" Nina asked from the gallery. "By you, perhaps?" The judge cut her a look. "Counsel, identify yourself." "Nina Patel, attorney for Miss Thompson." The judge's shoulders eased a fraction. "Of course." To Michael, Mr. Thompson, I have an objection on file that indicates this matter may involve a fraudulent filing. Do you want to confer with counsel? You are permitted to request a continuance. Michael's tongue touched his lip in that nervous way he has when his story starts to collapse. Your Honor, I filed in good faith. We received a notification. I can withdraw the petition if that simplifies things. That will simplify nothing, the judge said. It wasn't unkind, it was surgical. Miss Thompson, will you approach the bench with your counsel? At the sidebar, close enough to see the rising veins in the judge's hand, Nina spoke succinctly. She had copies of the false document, the timeline, the phone logs, the letter from the pension office, and a statement from the funeral home employee who had, at the investigator's employment, called the number on the file and recorded the instructions someone gave. We did not say his name. We did not have to. The judge exhaled slowly through her nose. All right, she said. We're going to take a short recess. When court resumed, the tone of the room had shifted by a full octave. The judge addressed the record calmly. The court has been presented with credible evidence that the decedent in the petitioner's filing is, in fact, alive. The petition is denied. The court refers this matter to the county attorney for further review. Miss Thompson, if you would like protective orders or other relief, please confer with your counsel. Vanessa made a noise then, a small wounded sound like someone had stepped on a glass ornament. She whispered, "Michael," as if she had just discovered a stain she could not get out. He didn't look at her. He stared at the tabletop, at his hands, at the past unspooling behind his eyes like an old film. The men who had risen with Nina approached Michael quietly as the judge moved to the next case. They didn't handcuff him. This wasn't a theater piece. They asked if he was willing to answer a few questions in the hall. He said yes, because he is who he is. A person who believes he can talk his way through a hurricane. He turned to me as he stood, and for a second the gray suit dropped away, and I saw my boy at 10, mouth sticky with grape popsicle, eyes shiny with a pride he hadn't earned. He opened his mouth to say something. He closed it. I sat very still until the case after mine, a dispute over an aunt's antique furniture, blurred into meaningless words. Then I walked out into the corridor. Mavis was there. She put both hands on my shoulders and said loudly and clearly, "You did that." I nodded because nodding was all I could do without crying. In the weeks that followed, the administrative machines that had tried to swallow me spit me back out one by one. Social Security corrected my status everywhere it traveled. The pension office issued the back deposit and flagged my file for caution. The bank unfroze the account and apologized with the kind of customer service earnestness that almost makes a person feel bad for ever having a problem. The funeral home director, a different woman from Judith who had a spine made of rebar, called to say she had fired the employee who had helped a friend process paperwork that never should have been processed, and that the state would be in touch. The county attorney filed charges against Michael and 2 others, a notary who had attested to a signature that didn't exist in the world as anything other than pixels, and a man at the funeral home who had carried a clipboard and a God complex. People always ask this part like it's gossip, so I'll tell you gently. Accusations are not convictions. I did not see my son led in handcuffs through a crowd. This was not a television show. It was a stack of paper and a series of dates and a room with cheap carpet where men and women took turns saying, "Your Honor," in voices that tried to mean it. Nina asked me again what I wanted. I thought about it. I could have said prison. I could have said scorched earth. I could have said I wanted to see his name in a headline that made neighbors turn their heads on evening walks. What I said was this: I want protection. I want restitution. I want it in ink that he cannot talk me into forgiving away. And I want the systems around me to know me by my presence again and not by the paperwork someone filed. She nodded. We'll pursue a civil action for damages and an order that keeps him from contacting you. The criminal matter will take its own path. Prepare yourself for him to reach out. He will say what he thinks you need to hear. He did. He called from a number I didn't recognize and left a message that went like this: "Mom, I don't know how this got so twisted. I was trying to help with the accounts. You know how bureaucracies are. Vanessa's freaking out. Please don't do this. We're family." He wrote me a letter where he used the word miscommunication twice in the span of one paragraph and told me he loved me 9 times as if a count could tip the scale. He said the funeral home had made a mistake. He said he thought the probate was necessary to get access to the pension to make sure it kept coming. He said a lot of things that added up to a math problem where 1 and 1 made 0, and I was supposed to pretend it was close enough. I wrote back through Nina with a letter that said precisely what it needed to say and not a sentence more. We would proceed with the civil suit. I would not be withdrawing my complaint. I would not be speaking to him outside the presence of counsel. I wished him well. That last line was not passive-aggressive. It was practical. Wishing someone well is lighter to carry than wishing them dead when you learned, on a Thursday in June, how heavy death can be when your own name sits under it. The civil suit resolved faster than I expected. Michael agreed to pay back the money he had siphoned slowly and not so slowly from my accounts, to compensate me for the expenses I incurred correcting the mess, and to cover the fees for the attorney who pieced my life back together. He signed a statement admitting that he had filed a petition in error and had submitted documents that were not, in fact, what they claimed to be. He agreed to a protective order that prevented him from contacting me except through counsel for matters related to the case. There is a temptation in such moments to feel triumph. I felt relief the way a person feels shade when she steps under a tree at noon in July. If you are listening and hoping for a Hollywood ending in which my son stood up in court, burst into tears, apologized to everyone including the bailiff, and came to my house the next day to scrub the floors and mow the lawn, that is not the ending I got. What I got was a quiet. What I got was a space in which to hear my own thoughts again. People asked if I would keep the house. It holds the sound of Michael's first steps and the dent in the hallway where he tripped and smacked his shoulder against the wall. It holds the afternoon sunlight on the kitchen tile and the view of the palm tree that looks like a person waving. It holds the night I woke to coyotes yipping and lay there in the dark with a smile because they sounded like laughter. It also holds the morning I sat with a newspaper and read, for the first time in my life, my name in the past tense. I decided I deserved rooms that didn't carry that. I sold the house to a young family with a toddler who loved the backyard like a personal planet. They sent me, after they closed, a picture of her with watermelon on her face on the patio, and I cried in the best possible way. I moved to a 2-bedroom apartment in a senior community in Scottsdale, with fountains that look expensive and a library with a window that frames the mountains like a painting. The first night there, the neighbors gathered for bingo, and a woman named Teresa thrust a glass of lemonade into my hand and told me that the trick to winning is to shout bingo, even when you're 2 spaces shy, just to wake everyone up. I told her I would try it. We became friends. I learned line dancing on Tuesday mornings and joined a watercolor class where I discovered that desert skies look like they were painted by someone who believed in second chances. I made a decision about the rest of what I had. I called the Education Foundation and set up a scholarship in Daniel's name for first-generation college students who want to teach. I didn't make it a fortune. I made it enough to matter. I wrote a letter to go with the award every year and told the students who would read it that someone believed in their quiet grit. I wrote them that justice is not an abstract word on marble. It lives in the way we treat the people who cannot do anything for us in return. One afternoon in August, months after the courtroom and the corridor and the gray suit, I went to my mailbox and found a letter with Michael's handwriting. My hand hovered over the trash can. I took it back inside instead. I made tea. I opened it like you open something you know can cut you. "Mom," it began. And for a moment, the word itself took my breath away. He wrote that he had hired a counselor. He wrote that he had lied more to himself than to me, and that this wasn't an excuse. He wrote that he didn't sleep much. He wrote, "I did not believe the world would question it because you have been so steady that I thought my story would simply become the truth." He wrote, "I am sorry," twice. Once at the top and once at the bottom, and in between, he told me about a moment in the hearing when I said my full name, and he realized he'd forgotten it was May in the middle. He wrote, "I think that tells you something. It tells me something." I sat with the letter for 3 days like it was a small animal that might bite or might, with a little time, crawl into my lap and sleep. Then I wrote back. I wrote, "I'm glad you are telling the truth to someone. I hope you do it for a long time. I forgive you because I have no interest in carrying poison, but forgiveness does not mean access. It does not mean we share space or holidays or last names at doctors' offices. It means only what it means. I wish you well from a distance that is safe for me." I mailed it and walked for a very long time in the evening light among saguaro that have watched centuries pass like minutes. Sometimes, in the quiet of my apartment, I ask myself if there was a different set of choices I could have made when he was small that would have bent the path. I am an educator by trade. We are cursed and blessed with the belief that if we had just put the right book in the right hands at the right time, the world could be kinder. I think of the lie in 5th grade. I think of every yes I said when a no would have been a lesson. I think of the ways love can be both a blanket and a blindfold. And then I think of my mother, who lived in a little house in Yuma and wore aprons with roosters on them, and told me when I was 21 and stubborn in the way only 21 can be, "Ellie, you cannot protect people from their own choices. You can try. You can build fences and put up signs and hand out maps. But some folks will always insist there is a shortcut through the thorn bush." I remind myself that my son is not the worst thing he ever did, and I am not the worst mistake I ever made. We are both more complicated. The truth did not save my marriage to my son. It did save me. Do people in the community talk? Of course they do. Some speak to me in the grocery store as if I am a legend. "Aren't you the lady who walked into her own probate hearing?" And I find myself laughing. Some drop their voices and say they are praying for me, and I accept the prayers because they are offerings from hearts that want to help. Some look down at their carts as if the oranges can rescue them from awkwardness. I make it easy for them. "How are you doing?" they ask. "I am thriving," I say. Not fine. Not getting by. Thriving. It is the truth, and truth spoken aloud grows stronger legs. Once I ran into Vanessa on the sidewalk outside a cafe. She was wearing sunglasses large enough to hide a multitude of sins. She took them off and said so softly I had to lean in to catch it. "I didn't know the whole plan. He told me it was a way to secure your benefits, to protect you. I wanted the security. I am sorry." She looked worse than I had seen her. Thinner, the gloss gone from her hair, a bruise of regret under each eye. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "I hope you make choices that suit the person you want to be." She put the sunglasses back on. "I will," she said. "I am learning that wanting a thing and deserving a thing are not the same." I walked away feeling not vindicated exactly, clean maybe, as if a window had been opened in a room I hadn't realized had gone stale. If you are listening to this because something in your life has broken in a shape you don't recognize, let me tell you what I tell the women in my watercolor class when they sigh and say they've ruined the sky. You haven't. You've just made it into a different day. You can add color. You can choose a new horizon. You can decide at 68 or 72 or 85 that your boundaries are not mean. They are fences that keep joy in and trespass out. On a Sunday evening not long ago, I stood on my balcony with a glass of iced tea and watched the sun go down. The sky did its usual miracle. Oranges that looked like they'd been pressed from citrus, pinks so soft you could fall into them and sleep, a blue that made you understand why poets write the way they do. Across the way, Teresa waved and shouted that I had to come taste the cobbler she'd made with peaches so sweet they tasted like summer, had apologized for being hot. I waved back. I thought about the judge's bun and the clerk's eyebrows and Nina's smile and the way the bailiff's hand moved toward his radio. I thought about the way it felt to say my name into a microphone in that room. Eleanor May Thompson. Present. It is a funny thing, presence. It's not just being in the room. It's being in your own life with both feet. It's waking up and making your bed and knowing the shape of your day and refusing to be a minor character in the story someone else is trying to write for you. It's understanding, finally, that love that asks you to disappear is not love. It's hunger. and you are not food. Michael has not called again. The criminal case will do what it does, slowly, like a river wearing rock down grain by grain. Maybe there will be a plea. Maybe there will be a sentence. It is not my job to shove it along or throw myself in front of it. My job is to be alive. My job is to teach the world one more thing before I go. So I go to the foundation office, entero, and stuff envelopes for the scholarship committee. I stand at a podium and tell a room of new teachers on a hot August night that they will change lives they don't even know they've touched. I go home and feed the stray cat who has decided my patio chair is hers between midnight and dawn. I call Mavis and ask about her tomatoes. I answer the quiet. When I close my eyes, I sometimes see Michael at 9 in a striped t-shirt, running toward me across a lawn with his whole heart in his face. I see him at 22, neat hair and an ironed shirt, holding up the acceptance letter as if it were a banner and we were in a parade. I see him at 38 in a gray suit that fit wrong, eyes flicking, plans unraveling. And I see myself the day after the hearing, barefoot in my kitchen, making toast and humming without even realizing I was humming because the air in the house had become safe again. Those images share space. I let them. They are all true. If you ever find your name where it should not be, in a little black box or a line of code or a whisper that someone repeats until they think it is real, know this. You can say your name out loud and the sound of it can stop a machine. You can find people who will stand shoulder to shoulder with you in ugly rooms and make ugliness blink. You can forgive without opening your door. You can love a person you do not let inside. You can write a new middle name for yourself without changing a single form. Eleanor May Thompson, alive. I didn't choose a gavel for myself when I retired, though the teachers gave me a clock and a cake with too much frosting and a card in which all the kids wrote, in various levels of legibility, that I was the best principal ever. But sometimes, when the day is done and the Palo Verde out front has thrown lacework shadows across the sidewalk and the world is quiet, I imagine one. I imagine setting it down gently on the bench of my own life and saying, not in anger and not in triumph, but in the simple clarity of a person who knows, order. I have given that to myself. And I can't help it. The teacher in me wants you to have it too. The first winter in the new apartment, the community put up lights around the courtyard. The maintenance man, a retired Marine with a heart of gold and shoulders like a coat rack, strung them in perfect arcs. And when he plugged them in, a low O rolled around the group because even jaded people are children when lights come on in the dark. I stood there with a paper cup of hot cocoa and felt something in my chest, unclenched that I hadn't realized was clenched. Teresa elbowed me and said, "See? Worth it." And I nodded. At New Year's, I wrote a list. Not resolutions, invitations. I wrote paint more skies. I wrote say yes when Mavis asks me to try pickleball even if I look silly. I wrote buy peaches and eat them over the sink. I wrote keep the scholarship funded. I wrote tell the truth even when it's inconvenient, especially then. And at the bottom, because I am my mother's daughter and Daniel's wife and Michael's mother and myself, I wrote hold the line. Softly if you can, firmly if you must. A month later, a young woman came by the foundation to thank the donors for her award. Her name was Lila. She had hair the color of good coffee and a grin that made the room brighter. She told me her mother worked at a motel in Yuma and had given her exactly one piece of advice. Keep your head and your heart, baby. She said she wanted to teach 8th grade English because that's when kids think they know everything and secretly want someone to know them better than they know themselves. I laughed like someone had told me a joke I'd been waiting years to hear. I told her I had a classroom for her to visit whenever she wanted and a stack of Raymond Carver she could borrow. She hugged me when she left, and I stood there, small in a lobby full of glossy brochures and big hopes, and let it soak in. The thing about being declared dead is that every ordinary day afterward is a little like resurrection. The morning light is unfairly beautiful. The cashier's hello is a kindness you don't overlook. The bus driver's nod is benediction. The last time I saw Michael, if you can call it that, was from across a wide street downtown. He was waiting at a crosswalk, his hands in his coat pockets, because Phoenix thinks 50 degrees is Arctic. He looked, for the first time in a long time, like a person rather than a crisis. He didn't see me. The light changed. He stepped off the curb. I didn't wave. I didn't call out. I let him become part of the moving picture of a city doing what cities do. And I walked into a bakery where the air smelled like sugar and butter had gotten married in a church. The man behind the counter asked if I wanted the almond croissant or the chocolate one. I said, both. He laughed and said, my kind of customer. And I carried the little paper bag outside and sat on a bench and ate my pastries slowly and thought, not of endings and headlines and what-ifs, but of almond paste and the way light moves across glass. I am alive. I am here. I am not done. And if you're listening, if you've been told you are less than you are, if someone you love has sold your story to a cheaper plot, take this from a woman who has stood under fluorescent lights and said her name into a mic like a spell. You can write the next line. You can say, present. You can hand yourself a gavel and knock once, twice, 3 times until the noise quiets and everyone sits down and listens. Order.